Don't run that design past cycle 17. The words left Marcus Reed's mouth before he could stop them, quiet but sharp enough to cut through the polished silence of the 41st floor conference room. 12 executives turned toward him. So did Victor Hale, the company's celebrated chief engineer, whose smile tightened by half an inch. Marcus stood beside an open air conditioning panel in a Navy maintenance uniform, one hand still holding a voltage meter, the other resting against the wall. He had been called upstairs because the ventilation system was making a low, uneven hum above the presentation screen. He had not been invited to speak. He had not been invited to look at the blueprints spread across the black walnut table. Yet the moment CEO Naomi Bennett lifted one yellowed sheet from Victor's portfolio, Marcus forgot the broken fan, the executives, and the fact that men in his position were expected to remain useful and invisible. In the lower right corner of the page was a crooked circle around the mark R17. Beside it sat a crescent-shaped burn no larger than a thumbnail. Naomi followed his stare. "Do you recognize this?" Marcus did not answer. He crossed the room, shut down the vibrating air unit, and waited until the ceiling stopped trembling. Only then did he step toward the table. The sheet smelled faintly of old paper and machine oil. Beneath the newer blue ink, a pencil line pressed through the fibers at an angle Marcus remembered drawing at 2 in the morning, 3 years before anyone in that room had learned the project's name. Victor placed one hand over the page. "This meeting concerns proprietary engineering, Ms. Bennett. Maintenance should finish its work and leave." Marcus looked at his hand, then at Victor's face. "Then you should know what R17 means." A project manager near the window gave a polite laugh. No one joined him. Naomi lowered the paper but did not release it. She was a black woman in her early 40s, composed enough to make stillness feel like authority. She studied Marcus without sympathy and Victor without trust. "Mr. Hale says this is an early draft of the Aquila thermal control system," she said. "He says he created it in 2018. Marcus glanced again at the burn mark. That paper was damaged during a bench test in October 2017. Victor's expression remained warm. Old technical sheets passed through many hands. Perhaps Mr. Reed cleaned the lab. The insult was delivered gently, wrapped in professional language. That was how men like Victor worked. They did not push you down in public. They simply explained why you had always belonged beneath them. Marcus felt the familiar pressure behind his ribs, the old warning that told him to protect his paycheck, his daughter's health insurance, and the fragile peace he had built after being moved from engineering to basement maintenance. He could walk away. He had survived by walking away before. Then he noticed a second detail. The cooling channel on the drawing still ended 2 inches too early. The flaw had been left exactly where he had marked it before the redesign. Naomi asked, "Is that yours?" Marcus met her eyes. "The mistake is." Victor gave a controlled sigh. "This is becoming theatrical." "No," Marcus said. "Theater is presenting a design you cannot explain." Naomi placed the blueprint flat on the table. Outside the glass walls, downtown traffic moved 40 stories below, silent from that height. Inside, the projector fan clicked, stopped, then clicked again. Victor adjusted his cuff and smiled as though the question bored him. R17 is revision 17. Marcus shook his head once. There were only 6 revisions. Grant Mercer, the project manager seated beside Victor, closed his folder too quickly. Naomi noticed. So did Marcus. She turned the page toward Victor and tapped the crooked circle with one finger. "Explain why the cooling path ends here." Victor looked down. 1 second passed. Then 2. His answer arrived polished but empty. It was an abandoned routing concept. Marcus could hear the same ceiling vent beginning to hum again, softer now, like a warning traveling through metal. "Then tell her what happens after the 17th thermal cycle." Victor looked up. "Nothing happens." Marcus rested his voltage meter on the table, careful not to touch the blueprint. The alloy expands unevenly. Pressure rises in the return channel. The control system reads it as a core failure and shuts the engine down. The chief engineer's smile disappeared. Naomi's gaze moved from one man to the other. How certain are you? Marcus looked at the burn mark, the hidden pencil groove, and the symbol his daughter had once circled with a red crayon while waiting for him to finish work. Certain enough that someone removed my name, he said. Naomi slowly lifted the blueprint again. Mr. Hale, she said, her voice calm enough to make the whole room hold its breath. Run the cycle test. Victor did not move. Victor did not move because he already knew what the test would reveal. Naomi watched him for a moment, then turned to the systems analyst at the far end of the table. Run the simulation. The analyst hesitated. On the current prototype model? On the archived design, Naomi said. The one Mr. Hale just claimed as his. Grant Mercer leaned forward with a measured smile. He was the kind of manager who could make obstruction sound like prudence. Naomi, the board review begins in less than an hour. We should not let an unverified accusation disrupt a major launch. Marcus remained beside the conference table, his maintenance badge clipped to his chest, his old engineering history hidden beneath a uniform everyone thought explained him. Naomi looked at Grant. Then verification should help us. No one answered. The analyst began loading the thermal model. Numbers filled the screen. Victor finally took his seat, calm on the surface, but his right thumb kept rubbing the edge of his silver cuff link. Marcus had seen that habit before. 3 years earlier, Victor had done the same thing in Prototype Room 3 while Grant explained why Marcus needed to sign a disciplinary statement before sunrise. Back then, Marcus had not been wearing a maintenance uniform. He had been a senior systems engineer with his own access code, his own team, and a daughter waiting downstairs with crayons spread across his desk. The failed test had triggered an internal investigation. Grant entered the meeting carrying 5 personnel files and 1 prepared confession. 1 signature, he had said, placing the paper in front of Marcus. The company records an unauthorized adjustment under your name. The junior team stays employed. The project survives. Marcus had looked through the glass wall at 5 young engineers who had followed his instructions exactly. None of them had changed the settings. The change had been entered later, after the test, by someone using administrative access. Marcus knew it. Grant knew he knew it. And if I refuse? Marcus had asked. Grant folded his hands. Then the entire team becomes part of the investigation. Victor stood near the door, saying nothing. His silence had been more honest than Grant's words. Marcus had recently buried his wife. His daughter, Nia, was 8 years old and still sleeping with the hallway light on. Their health insurance came through the company. Their mortgage was already 2 payments behind. So Marcus signed. He believed he was accepting a temporary suspension. Instead, his access vanished, his office was cleared, and his name disappeared from the project. 2 weeks later, Human Resources offered him a maintenance position with benefits. They called it an accommodation. The basement crew called it work. Marcus called it survival. The memory faded as the conference room screen reached thermal cycle 12. Naomi glanced toward him. Why did you never file a claim? Marcus kept his eyes on the simulation. I did. Grant answered before anyone asked him. The complaint contained no supporting documentation. Marcus turned slowly. I did not say what kind of claim. A small silence opened between them. Grant's smile remained, but his shoulders tightened. Evelyn Shaw, the company's general counsel, entered through the glass doors holding a thin folder. She was polished, calm, and already prepared. Mr. Reed, she said gently, before this continues, I need to remind you that your employment agreement contains confidentiality obligations. Naomi's expression sharpened. Who called legal? Evelyn looked at Grant. Grant looked at Victor. Neither spoke. The simulation reached cycle 14. Marcus noticed something else in Evelyn's folder. A yellow tab marked with his employee number. She had arrived with a warning. Prepared before he had made a formal accusation. You move quickly, Marcus said. Evelyn offered a professional smile. My job is to protect the company. From what? Unverified statements. Marcus looked at Naomi. Then someone verified enough to be afraid. The temperature graph climbed. Cycle 15 passed cleanly. Cycle 16 followed. Victor leaned back as if confidence could become evidence. "You see?" he said. "Nothing." Marcus did not answer. He was watching the return channel pressure rise by fractions too small for most people in the room to notice. Naomi saw his focus and turned toward the analyst. "Continue." At that moment, Marcus's radio crackled at his belt. A young woman's voice came through, nervous and low. It was Maya Brooks, the engineering intern he had helped earlier that morning. "Mr. Reed, I found something in the archive system. A folder with your name on it." Grant stood so quickly his chair rolled backward. "Shut that channel off." Marcus looked directly at him. "Why?" Grant froze. Maya's voice returned through the radio. "The folder is called Reed 17. Maya's voice vanished beneath a burst of static, and for 1 second the conference room seemed to lose all air. Grant reached toward Marcus's radio. "That archive is restricted." Marcus moved the device out of reach without raising his voice. "Then why does an intern have access to it?" "She does not," Grant said. "Which means she accessed it improperly." Naomi turned from the simulation screen. Cycle 16 was still holding, the pressure line creeping upward in pale red. "Where is she?" Marcus pressed the radio button. "Maya, do not open anything else. Tell me where you are." Her reply came softer this time. "Records room on 38. The folder appeared in a temporary index, then disappeared. I took a picture of the screen." Evelyn Shaw closed her folder. "Ms. Brooks needs to stop immediately and report to management." "She needs to preserve what she saw," Marcus said. Evelyn's expression remained kind. "You are not qualified to instruct her on evidence handling."
"No," Marcus replied.
"But I know what happens when people sign things before they understand them." Grant looked at Naomi. "This has gone far enough." Naomi did not look back. "The simulation continues. Mr. Reed, go to 38. Ms. Shaw, you will come with me. Mr. Mercer, remain here." That last instruction landed harder than any accusation. Marcus left the room and took the service stairs because the executive elevators were locked for the board arrival. By the time he reached 38, Maya stood beside a gray metal cabinet with her laptop open and both hands trembling around her phone. She was 22, ambitious, careful, and still young enough to believe that company rules and company truth were usually the same thing. "I did not search your name," she said quickly. "I was looking for the maintenance serial report you asked for." The index refreshed, and the folder appeared for maybe 3 seconds. Marcus looked at the laptop but did not touch it. "Did you open the folder?" "No." "Did you move any files?" "No." "Good." Maya swallowed. "Am I in trouble?" Footsteps approached from the hall. Grant's assistant arrived with a security supervisor and a form already printed. "Ms. Brooks, you are required to surrender the laptop and sign this access statement." Maya stared at the form. "It says I intentionally entered confidential engineering records." "Standard language," the assistant said. "Sign, and we can clear this up." Marcus stepped beside her. "Do not sign something that is not true." The assistant lowered her voice. "Mr. Reed, this does not concern you." Marcus read the first line. "It concerns me enough." The security supervisor shifted uncomfortably. He knew Marcus from the basement and had watched him repair half the building without ever asking who received the credit. "Marcus," he said quietly, "we have instructions. Then write down who gave them." Maya looked at Marcus, fear gathering behind her eyes. "They will end my internship." He remembered 5 young engineers behind a glass wall, waiting for him to decide whose future would be sacrificed. He remembered his own signature. "Tell them I sent you here," he said. Maya shook her head. "But you did not. I sent you to verify equipment records." "That is true. If the archive exposed something else, that is not your misconduct." The assistant frowned. "You are accepting responsibility for unauthorized access?" "I am accepting responsibility for the task I gave her. Nothing more." Naomi and Evelyn arrived as the words settled. Naomi studied the unsigned form, then Marcus. You understand this could be your final warning? Yes. And you are still taking responsibility? Marcus glanced at Maya. For what I actually did. Naomi's gaze held on him for a long moment. She had spent years around executives who accepted praise in groups and blame in private rooms. Marcus was doing the opposite. Evelyn extended her hand toward the laptop. We need custody of the device. Marcus stopped her with one sentence. Not until the screen is documented. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Why? Because if a temporary file still exists in cache, opening or closing the wrong application could alter it. Naomi turned to the security supervisor. Call independent compliance. Photograph the device. Record the time. No one touches the keyboard. Maya exhaled for the first time in several minutes. Then the laptop screen flickered. A small preview image appeared inside the recent files pane. A yellowed blueprint, a crescent burn at the corner, and the crooked mark R17. Maya lifted her phone and took a picture. The preview vanished almost instantly. A notification appeared in its place. Remote session terminated. Naomi's face changed. Who had remote access? Evelyn said nothing. Marcus looked at the empty space where the image had been. Someone who knew exactly what we were about to find. Someone had erased the preview, but they had not erased Maya's photograph. Naomi looked at the image on her phone, then at the blank screen of the laptop. Send that picture to independent compliance, she said. Not company information technology. Not legal. Compliance only. Evelyn's voice stayed measured. A photograph of a thumbnail proves very little. Then we will test what it suggests, Naomi replied. She returned to the conference room with Marcus, Maya, and the security supervisor. Grant was standing near the windows. Victor remained seated beside the thermal simulation, which had been paused at cycle 16. The room felt colder now, though the air conditioning unit Marcus had repaired was running quietly. Naomi placed Maya's phone on the table. The archived image matches the physical draft. Victor studied it without surprise. That troubled Marcus more than anger would have. Old files are often duplicated, Victor said. Mr. Reed worked near the project. He may have seen preliminary material. Marcus nodded once. That is possible. Maya turned toward him. But you said it was yours. I said I knew the mistake. Marcus looked at Naomi. A memory is not proof. Picture is not proof. Let the design answer. Naomi folded her arms. How? Marcus pointed to the cooling path on the screen. Separate us. Give Mr. Hale and me the same drawing with the names removed. Ask one question. Victor smiled faintly. You want an engineering examination?
No.
I want you to explain your own work. Naomi considered the request, then directed 2 analysts to prepare identical copies. Marcus was taken to a small interview room across the hall. Victor remained in the conference room.
No phones.
No network access. Every answer recorded. 10 minutes later, Naomi entered Marcus's room carrying the anonymous diagram. She set it down and covered the lower corner where R17 had been marked. Why does the return channel stop here? Marcus studied the page. He did not rush. The line ended 2 inches before the pressure junction, exactly where the early alloy model had created uneven expansion. Because this was never a finished route, he said. It was a warning. A warning about what? Resonance. Naomi's eyes narrowed. So the letter R does not mean read? No. And 17? The first alloy reached dangerous thermal drift after 17 repeated cycles. Not enough to damage the core, but enough to trigger the safety shutdown. Naomi watched him carefully. Could someone have learned that from an old report? Yes. Then your answer proves nothing. Correct. The word made her pause. Marcus did not need her belief. He needed a process strong enough to survive disbelief. What would prove it? She asked. He traced the air above the drawing without touching the paper. Run a sealed simulation using only the archived geometry. Then change the alloy values by 3%. The person who designed the system should know whether the shutdown moves earlier or later. Naomi asked, "Does it?" "Neither. The temperature changes, but the shutdown remains at 17 because the sensor timing is fixed in the control logic." That was the hidden error. Across the hall, Victor was asked the same question. His recorded answer arrived 5 minutes later. He called R17 revision 17 and predicted the altered alloy would delay shutdown until cycle 19. Both explanations sounded technical. Only one could be true. Naomi ordered the analysts to build the sealed test. Grant objected immediately. "This is an unnecessary disruption based on the claims of a maintenance employee. A maintenance employee who predicted a fault your chief engineer says does not exist," Naomi replied. Evelyn leaned toward her. "At minimum, the results should remain confidential until legal review." Naomi looked at her. "Why are you planning how to contain results we do not have yet?" Evelyn's silence was brief, but it was enough. The analysts loaded the anonymous model. Marcus stood at the back of the room beside Maya. He noticed she was still holding her phone tightly. "You did well," he told her. "I almost signed that form." "Almost is not the same as did." "Why did you protect me?" Marcus watched the first cycle appear on the screen. "Because someone should have protected the people who came before you." Cycle 8 passed. Then 12. Victor explained that minor pressure changes were normal. Grant nodded as though agreement could steady the graph. Cycle 15 remained green. Cycle 16 remained green. Naomi did not look at Marcus. She watched the numbers. The 17th cycle began. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Victor's smile returned. Then the return pressure rose, the safety control engaged, and the model shut itself down. Red letters filled the screen. Thermal protection sequence activated. No one spoke. Naomi turned to Marcus. "You were right." Marcus shook his head. "The test was right." Victor stood. "He could have known the old results." "Then we need something he could not memorize," Naomi said. Marcus looked at the serial number attached to the archived simulation file. He recognized the first 6 digits. "There is a backup drive," he said. Grant's face changed. "No, there is not." Marcus looked directly at him. "I never said where it was." Grant's denial settled over the room like dust after a door had slammed shut. Naomi did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "You seem very certain, Mr. Mercer." Grant straightened his tie. "I know the archive inventory. There is no backup drive connected to this project." Marcus looked at the serial number on the screen again. "It was never connected to the main archive." Victor leaned back in his chair. "Convenient." Marcus ignored him. Prototype Room 3 had an offline storage cabinet beneath the old vibration bench. "We used it when the central server failed during overnight testing." Naomi turned to the facilities director. "Does that room still exist?" The director opened a building map on his tablet, searched twice, then frowned. "Not under that name. The space was converted into supply storage 3 years ago." "Who approved the conversion?" Naomi asked. The director looked at the authorization record. "Grant Mercer." No one spoke for a moment. Grant offered a patient smile. "It was unused space. That proves nothing." "Then you will not mind if we inspect it," Naomi said. She took Marcus, Maya, the security supervisor, and an independent compliance officer down to the sublevel beneath the original engineering floor. Victor and Evelyn followed. Grant came last, still calm, still wearing the face of a man who believed procedures could protect him from facts. The old corridor smelled of concrete, dust, and machine oil. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Marcus had walked that hallway hundreds of times before his badge stopped opening the engineering doors. At the end stood a gray room marked Supply B. The modern floor plan showed shelves, cleaning equipment, and spare hardware. Marcus stepped inside and looked past the boxes. The cabinet was behind that wall. Grant sighed. That wall was installed during renovation. Marcus crouched near the baseboard. A thin line of warmer air moved across the floor. "No," he said. "It was installed to hide a service opening." He reached toward an electrical panel, then stopped. The metal cover was warm. A faint burning smell drifted from behind it. Everyone out, Victor scoffed. It is a storage room, not a disaster zone. Marcus did not argue. He pointed to the overloaded power strip feeding 3 space heaters and an old dehumidifier behind the shelving. The circuit is carrying more than it was designed to hold. Naomi moved Maya toward the door. Marcus shut off the breaker from the external panel, waited for the indicator light to go dark, and called building safety before touching anything else. Only after the room was declared safe did the facility's crew remove the false wall. Behind it stood a narrow steel cabinet coated in dust. Marcus did not open it. Compliance should document the seal first. The officer photographed the cabinet from every angle, recorded the time, and placed gloves on the table. Naomi watched Marcus carefully. The evidence could restore his name, yet he treated it as though protecting the truth mattered more than possessing it. Inside the cabinet were 3 equipment logs, a box of magnetic tapes, and 4 empty drive cases. One case still carried a faded serial label. Maya compared it to the number in her photograph. It matches. Evelyn stepped closer. An empty case is not a drive. No, Marcus said, but it tells us what is missing. The compliance officer opened the oldest equipment log. Several entries were initialed MR beside one date in October 2017 was the note. Thermal Trial 17, emergency shutdown, archive copied offline. Naomi turned to Marcus. Your initials? Yes. Grant looked over her shoulder. Anyone could have written those. Marcus nodded. That is why we keep looking. The security supervisor requested access records for the storage room. The modern badge system only went back 18 months, but 2 recent entries appeared under Grant's executive credential. One was 6 weeks earlier. The other was 9 days earlier, shortly before the project launch review began. Grant's expression remained composed. I oversee project facilities. I enter many rooms. Did you remove anything? Naomi asked. No, the hallway camera had been redirected during renovation, leaving the doorway outside its main angle. For several minutes, it seemed the trail ended there. Then Maya noticed a reflection in the polished metal surface of a fire equipment cabinet across the hall. The camera had not captured Grant's face clearly, but the reflection showed him leaving supply be carrying a black drive box. Compliance enlarged the image. A white serial sticker was visible on its side. The first 6 digits matched the empty case. Naomi looked at Grant. Where is that drive? His mask slipped for less than a second. There was nothing useful on the read drive. The corridor became completely still. Marcus did not smile. Naomi's voice dropped to a whisper. No one called it the read drive. Grant's own words had opened the first real crack in his defense, but Naomi did not rush to fill it with accusation. Return to the conference room, she said. No one leaves the building. No one accesses project files without compliance present. Victor's expression hardened. This has become a spectacle. Marcus looked at him.
No.
A spectacle needs an audience. This is only a question you cannot answer. Back upstairs, the independent compliance team placed the recovered logs and Maya's photograph into sealed evidence sleeves. Grant sat apart from the others, speaking quietly with Evelyn. Victor stood near the projection screen, studying Marcus with the careful resentment of a man who had spent years believing silence was permanent. Let us settle this properly, Victor said. Give him a technical review. No old folders. No dramatic stories. Just engineering. Naomi turned toward Marcus. Would you agree? Marcus knew the trap immediately. If he failed, Victor would call him a bitter former employee. If he succeeded, Victor would call him a capable mechanic who had studied someone else's work. I will, Marcus said. If the test is recorded, the input files are sealed, and neither of us sees the problem in advance. Victor smiled. Agreed. Too senior. Engineers who had not worked on Aquila created a new thermal routing problem using the same materials and control limits. The design appeared on both screens at once. A clock began counting down from 20 minutes. Victor moved quickly. He selected the most obvious pressure imbalance, adjusted the cooling branch, and began rewriting the control threshold. Marcus did not touch his keyboard. He studied the flow map, then the sensor order, then a thin reference line that most people would have dismissed as leftover construction geometry. Maya watched from behind the compliance barrier. "Why is he not doing anything?" she whispered. Naomi answered without looking away. "Because he is checking whether the problem is the one they want him to see." At 15 minutes, Victor announced that he had finished. "The return pressure is stabilized. The shutdown delay is corrected." Marcus still had not entered a single value. Victor leaned back. Perhaps maintenance work has made him cautious. Marcus finally placed his hands on the keyboard. Caution is what keeps a correction from becoming a second failure. He removed Victor's proposed threshold change from his own model, redirected one sensor, and left the cooling branch untouched. Naomi glanced at the clock. "Can you complete the correction before time expires?" "Yes." "Then why wait?" Marcus looked at the virtual system. "Because a safe design should not obey the clock of the person trying to win." He ran the diagnostic. The obvious pressure imbalance disappeared, then returned through a secondary path. Victor's solution forced the system to ignore the warning. Marcus's solution allowed the warning to remain but corrected the false reading at its source. One of the senior engineers leaned closer. "He is not changing the performance limit," she said. "He is correcting the sensor sequence." Marcus nodded. The engine was never overheating. The sensors were reporting events in the wrong order. Victor's jaw tightened. "That is one valid approach." "Then explain the extra reference line," Marcus said. Victor looked at the screen. "Formatting residue." Marcus enlarged it. The line carried a private numbering pattern that did not match company standards. A small offset appeared every fourth segment. Marcus had used that pattern years earlier to separate thermal assumptions from verified measurements. The same pattern existed in the original Aquila files and in Victor's new test setup. Naomi asked, "Could that be coincidence?" "Once, perhaps," Marcus said. "Across 4 generations of the design, no." Victor spoke too quickly. "You always obsessed over those reference marks in prototype room 3. Silence returned. Marcus slowly turned toward him. Naomi's eyes narrowed. "According to the official project history, Mr. Hale, you never worked with Mr. Reed in prototype room 3. Victor's face changed, but only for a moment. "I may have heard others mention it." "You remembered his habit," Naomi said. "And the exact room." Evelyn stepped forward. "This proves familiarity, not theft." "Then we will examine the machines that contain that familiarity," Naomi replied. She ordered Victor's workstation preserved and mirrored by the outside compliance team. Evelyn objected on privilege grounds. Grant called it an invasion of executive records. Naomi signed the authorization herself. The copy process took 23 minutes. No one spoke during most of it. The only sound was the low rotation of the secure backup unit and the faint click of the conference room clock. When the scan completed, the technician frowned. "There is a hidden partition." Naomi asked, "What is it called?" The technician turned the screen toward the room. The label appeared in plain white letters, M. Reed Archive. Victor's face lost its color. Marcus did not move. The technician tried to open it. Password prompt appeared. "Encrypted," he said. Naomi looked at Marcus. "Do you know the key?" Marcus stared at the name on the screen, then remembered Nia at 8 years old, sitting on the edge of his desk with a red crayon, watching the prototype lights pulse through the glass. She had written one sentence across the bottom of his notebook before falling asleep in his chair. Marcus looked at the keyboard. "I might." Marcus did not touch the keyboard immediately. The password prompt waited in the center of the screen, patient and blank. Around him, the conference room had become so quiet that the secure backup unit sounded like a distant fan in an empty church. Naomi stood beside the technician. Victor remained near the windows, his arms folded too tightly. Grant watched Marcus with the expression of a man calculating how much damage one sentence could do. "You have one attempt before the system locks," the technician said. Marcus nodded. "I know." He remembered Nia at 8 years old, her sneakers barely touching the floor, red crayon in hand while the prototype pulsed behind the glass. She had asked whether the machine would come back safely after every test. Marcus had told her that was the whole point. She had written a sentence across the bottom of his notebook in uneven letters. Make it come home safe. He typed the words slowly, without punctuation. The partition opened. No one moved. Folders appeared in chronological order, beginning 11 months before Victor's official project start date. Thermal models, handwritten scans, revision notes, email exports, audio files. Each carried original timestamps and digital signatures. The technician began verifying them against the company certificate archive. The signatures are valid, he said. Marcus Reed is listed as creator on the earliest files. Victor stepped forward. Those records could have been copied into my system later. Naomi did not look at him. Then the metadata will show that. It did. The archive history showed Victor had imported the files 2 days after the failed test, renamed the project, and removed Marcus from the visible author field. Marcus watched the dates appear one by one. He expected anger. Instead, he felt the dull weight of years finally given numbers. Evelyn moved closer to the screen. Metadata can establish possession, not intent. There is an audio folder, Maya said. Her voice was quiet, but everyone heard it. The technician opened the earliest recording. Grant's voice filled the room, younger but unmistakable. Marcus takes responsibility. We preserve the junior team, transfer ownership, and continue under Victor. Then Victor answered. He will not fight it. His daughter needs the insurance. Maya covered her mouth. Naomi closed her eyes for 1 second. Marcus did not. He had imagined many explanations over the years, but hearing his child reduced to leverage made the room feel smaller. The recording continued. Grant discussed removing access logs. Evelyn's voice appeared near the end, advising that any settlement should be tied to confidentiality. She had claimed that morning she joined the matter only after Marcus was reassigned. Stop the recording, Marcus said. The technician paused it. Naomi turned toward him. There is more. I know. It may strengthen your case. Marcus looked at the speaker on the table. The next part mentions my wife. The investigators can hear it. This room does not need to. Victor stared at him as if he could not understand why a man holding the power to humiliate him would choose restraint. Marcus understood. Dignity was not weakness. It was control over what pain was allowed to become. Naomi faced Evelyn. You said you had no prior knowledge of the archive. Evelyn's expression remained composed. I said I had no current access. You also said the agreement came after the investigation. It did. Then how did you know this recording was made before the agreement took effect? Evelyn's silence answered before she did. Grant leaned forward. This entire process is compromised. Mr. Reed supplied the password. Marcus looked at him. I supplied a sentence my daughter wrote before your version of the project existed. The technician opened another file. A scanned authorization showed Grant requesting deletion of Marcus's visible revision history. Beneath it was Victor's approval. Naomi stood very still. Preserve everything. External counsel. Independent investigators. No internal deletions. Evelyn tried once more. Naomi, public exposure could damage the company beyond repair. Then the damage began when the company decided truth was negotiable. She turned to Marcus. We can resolve this privately. Full restoration of title. Compensation. Education funding for Nia. A formal statement calling this an attribution error. Marcus looked through the glass wall at the city lights beginning to appear below. 3 years earlier, he would have signed almost anything to keep his daughter safe. Now the offer sounded less like repair and more like another carefully designed silence. How many others? He asked. Naomi frowned. What do you mean? Marcus pointed to a folder labeled reassigned personnel. Contained more names than his. How many people did they move, erase, or pressure before me? No one answered. Maya stepped closer to the screen. One of the names belonged to her father. Marcus looked at Naomi. Before I decide anything, I want every file opened. Maya stared at her father's name as though the screen had opened a door she had spent years believing was sealed. Daniel Brooks, contract systems technician, reassigned after compliance dispute. She read the line twice. They told us he left because he could not handle the work. Grant shifted in his chair. Personnel records require context. Marcus looked at him. Then provide it. The compliance officer opened the linked files. Daniel had reported that a senior engineer changed test results before a federal efficiency review. 2 weeks later, his contract was terminated for poor collaboration. The same pattern appeared again under another name, then another. A junior programmer whose code had been absorbed into a management patent. A materials specialist transferred after refusing to sign a revised lab report. A drafting technician who resigned after her contribution disappeared from the official record. 6 people. 6 quiet careers bent around the same polished explanation. Restructuring, performance, team alignment. Naomi stood at the head of the table, reading each file without speaking. The company she led had not been built only on innovation. Part of it had been built on people trained to doubt their own memories. Maya's hands trembled, but her voice did not. My father spent years thinking he failed us. Marcus turned toward her. You do not have to stay in this room. Yes, I do. You do not owe anyone your pain. Maya took out her phone. This is not only pain. She opened an audio recording made earlier that morning, after Marcus had warned her never to sign a statement she did not understand. Grant's voice came through clearly. The company does not pay for truth, Ms. Brooks. It pays for alignment. Then came the sound of paper sliding across a desk. Sign, and your internship continues. The recording ended. Grant's professional calm finally cracked. She recorded a private conversation without authorization. Evelyn spoke before Naomi could answer. State law permits a participant to record under these circumstances. Grant turned toward her. For the first time, the people who had protected one another began searching for distance. Naomi ordered every reassignment file preserved and every affected employee contacted through outside counsel. Several board members joined by secure video and immediately warned her about investor confidence, pending contracts, and public exposure. One suggested dismissing Victor, Grant, and Evelyn quietly while keeping the broader findings internal. Contain the individuals, he said. Protect the institution. Naomi looked at the names on the screen. The institution protected the individuals. Marcus remained silent until she asked him directly. What would justice look like to you? He could have named a number. He could have demanded Victor's office, Grant's authority, or the title removed from him 3 years ago. Instead, he said, give every person in those files a choice. Let them speak without losing severance, references, or benefits. Protect the junior employees who were pressured to follow orders. Then audit every patent and design credit from the last 10 years. One board member frowned. That could expose the company to enormous liability. So could the truth, Marcus said. The difference is whether you meet it standing up. Later that evening, Victor found Marcus alone outside the conference room, looking through the glass at the yellowed R-17 draft now sealed inside a clear evidence case. Victor closed the door behind him. His voice was low, almost tired. They would have killed your design. Marcus did not turn. Who? The board. The investors. Everyone who said your proposal was too expensive and too cautious. I gave it a name they could sell. You gave it your name. Victor stepped closer to the glass. Without me, Aquila would still be a sketch in a basement cabinet. Without me, it would shut down at cycle 17. Victor exhaled. Ideas do not belong to the person who thinks of them. They belong to the person who makes the world believe. A small red light blinked above the hallway camera. Victor noticed it too late. Marcus finally faced him. Then tomorrow, the world can hear both of us. Victor's eyes moved toward the camera, then back to Marcus. You would destroy this company to prove a point?
No.
I am giving it one chance to tell the truth before the lie becomes history. Inside the conference room, Naomi had heard enough through the security feed. She called the event director preparing the next morning's investor launch. "Do not cancel the presentation," she said. "Keep Victor's keynote exactly where it is." The director hesitated. "Then what changes?" Naomi looked at the evidence case, the archived files, and the empty chair beside the stage diagram. "Add 1 seat." By 9 o'clock the next morning, the auditorium was filled with investors, engineers, board members, and employees who believed they had come to witness the future of American energy. Victor stood beneath the Aquila logo in a tailored suit, speaking with the confidence of a man who had repeated the same history until everyone accepted it as truth. "This system represents 10 years of disciplined innovation," he said. "A vision my team and I carried from concept to completion." Marcus sat in the single chair Naomi had added beside the stage. He still wore his Navy maintenance uniform. Maya sat 3 rows behind him with the independent compliance officers. Grant and Evelyn occupied the front row, each surrounded by counsel, each wearing the calm expression of someone hoping procedure could still outrun evidence. When Victor finished, applause moved through the room. Naomi stepped onto the stage carrying the original draft inside a clear protective case. She waited until the applause faded. "Before we continue," she said, "there is one question this company must answer publicly." She removed the yellowed sheet and held it where the room could see the crooked circle, the crescent burn, and the mark R17. She turned toward Victor. "Is this yours?" Victor looked at the audience, then at the cameras recording the internal broadcast. "Yes, it is an early Aquila concept." Naomi nodded. "Then explain R17. A pause opened. Victor adjusted his cuff. "Revision 17. Marcus did not move. Naomi looked toward him. "Mr. Reed." Marcus rose and walked to the stage without hurry. He did not take the microphone from Victor. "There were 6 revisions," he said. "R means resonance. 17 is the thermal cycle where the sensor order creates a false core warning." Victor gave a thin smile. "That is his interpretation." "Then let the system choose," Naomi said. The independent laboratory connected its sealed simulation to the main screen. Cycle 12 passed. Then 14. Then 16. The room grew quieter with every green line. At cycle 17, return pressure rose, the safety control engaged, and the engine model shut itself down. Red letters appeared across the screen. Thermal protection sequence activated. No one applauded. Naomi began presenting the evidence in order. The paper stock dated before Victor's official start. The burn mark matched the 2017 test log. Light analysis revealed Marcus's name pressed beneath later ink. Maya's photograph showed the Reed 17 archive before remote deletion. Hallway footage showed Grant removing the matching drive. Metadata proved Victor imported Marcus's files and stripped the visible author field. The hidden partition preserved emails, revisions, and the recording of their decision to use Nia's insurance as leverage. Finally, the security camera played Victor's words from the night before. "Ideas belong to the person who makes the world believe." Victor stared at the floor. Evelyn closed her eyes. Grant rose abruptly. "I only deleted Reed's version because the project needed one official record." He stopped. The room became completely still. Naomi looked at him. "Yesterday, you said there was no Reed version." Grant slowly sat down. That single sentence did not prove the case by itself. It did not need to. It was the final link in a chain already closed. Naomi announced the immediate suspension of Victor, Grant, and Evelyn, an independent investigation, a 10-year audit of patent credits, and protection for every employee who cooperated. Then she turned to Marcus. "What should this company return to you?" He looked at the blueprint that had survived longer than the lie. "Not the years," he said. "No one can return those. Give the names back to everyone whose work was erased." Naomi offered him leadership of the restored engineering team. Marcus accepted only after securing protection for Maya, independent review for junior employees, and a permanent role for maintenance workers in design safety meetings. "The people who repair what fails," he said, "should be heard before it fails. Nia arrived after the presentation, wearing her school backpack and holding Naomi's visitor badge with both hands. She saw the crooked R17 mark beneath the glass. "Daddy, that is my circle." Marcus knelt beside her. "It is. Do they know it was yours?" He looked around the auditorium, where people were quietly adding forgotten names to the official project record. "They know the truth," he said. "That is enough." The next morning, a new suit waited in Marcus's office on the 41st floor. Before going upstairs, he stopped in the basement and repaired a stuck wheel on a maintenance cart. Maya watched him test it twice. "After everything, you still fix carts?" Marcus pushed it forward. The wheel rolled without a sound. There is no such thing as only maintenance when the work is done with dignity. Then he entered the elevator, not as a man finally allowed to be seen, but as one determined that no honest person in that building would ever be made invisible again.